Hello, I am Carla Kutter, real estate broker here in Banderas Bay, and I'm super excited to be here. Joining me today is George Reavis. He's from MexEdge, and he's going to teach us how to eliminate currency risks when sending money into Mexico. Hello, George. How are you?
Hola, Carla. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So tell us in simple terms, tell us what does MexEdge do? How can you help investors and buyers?
Sure. So basically, what we do is we come in at the beginning of a purchase or build process when somebody is buying or building something in Mexico. And we basically lock in a guaranteed exchange rate at the start of someone's process so that no matter what happens to the Canadian dollar and the peso or the US dollar and the peso, they know exactly how much their purchase or build is going to cost them. That's what we do in a nutshell.
Okay. How does the process, how does it begin? When do we contact you?
So, we like to get involved as early in the process as possible. When realtors have clients, we like to talk to them at the beginning, sometimes before they've even selected a house that they're going to buy or before they even maybe have a builder that they're going to work with. And we like coming in at the beginning so that we can explain how all of this works, how the currency conversion works, how moving the money works, so that it gives them peace of mind so that they can basically focus on what they're trying to do is buy a house or build a house. And we want them to be able to focus on that and not always be worried in the back of their brain, oh, well, what happens if the
Right,
peso goes from 20 to 18? So
right,
the earlier we can get involved, the better.
right. And obviously that is going to help them in the long run to save money to get in a locked-in rate, correct? How does the locked-in rate work?
So a locked-in rate basically works by we use forward contracts to lock in these guaranteed rates. And a forward contract is basically just an agreement between two parties to buy or sell a currency for a specific price on a specific date in the future. So we use those forward contracts to lock in that guaranteed rate. So then they know exactly how much it's going to cost, no matter what the peso does. And, we all have seen recently how volatile these currency markets are. And, people don't realize the effect that that can have on their overall purchase or what they pay for something. A lot of times people aren't thinking about it, right? So, just a quick example, if somebody is buying a 10 million peso condo in Puerto Vallarta and the peso is at 20, that means that that condo is going to cost them $500,000, right? But if between the time that they sign their purchase agreement and the time they actually close and pay for the property, if the peso were to go from 20 to 18 at that time, that same house is now going to cost them $555,000. So it can have a dramatic impact, right? And that's why we come in at the beginning to help protect them against those swings.
When you do when you do the lock-in rate is at the time of signing of the purchase agreement, for example? Is that when you get into a lock-in rate?
Yeah, it can be at the time that they sign their purchase agreement. A lot of times we tell people, maybe let's not do it right when you sign your purchase agreement, but once all the due diligence has been removed from the contract and you know that you are moving forward with your purchase or your build, that's the time to lock it in. Because these products that we use they are contracts. So if you sign a forward contract or enter into a forward contract and then your deal falls apart, you're still sort of on the hook for buying those pesos. So it's best to lock in the rate when you know all the due diligence has been removed from the contract and you are moving toward a closing date.
Okay. How if I was to buy purchase a property, like you said, 10 million pesos, right? And I want to buy it, and we did the due diligence, and we're ready to move forward. Today is the 21st of July. The peso is, 19.75. What assurance will I get? And I'm assuming that people will ask this, right? Well, if I lock in the red rate today, what happens in a week? It goes to 20 pesos and, it goes higher or lower. How is that going to affect me? And how will I know that I will not be locking in a rate that in the future can cost me less money rather than more? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. With us, yes, you could lock in a guaranteed rate and the peso, let's say you lock in a rate at 20, right? And you're locked in contractually to that rate of 20, and then the peso goes to 21. You will lose out on what we call an opportunity cost because you lose the opportunity to take advantage of that better rate. But our clients don't care for three reasons mainly. First is as soon as they lock in the rate, no matter what happens to the peso, they know that exactly what it's going to cost in their home currency, right? No matter what happens. Second, they are getting some upside, meaning our locked in rates are always increasing over time. Depending on the currency, that rate can increase between 3.5 and 6+% on an annual basis. So you're not just locking in a flat rate, you're locking in a rate that increases over time and you are getting some upside. So our clients love that. Then the other thing is they are protected against all of the downside. So if the peso goes to 10, it doesn't matter. They're protected against all of that downside. So as soon as they lock it in, they know how much it's going to cost them. They are getting some upside to it. It's not just a flat rate, and they're protected against all of the downsides, so they know what it's going to cost them.
I see. Can anybody that is sending money to Mexico, whether it's they're going to fix the house or they are going to, I don't know, they're gonna have to do some kind of transfer for some reason, whether it's buying, whether it's fixing. Can they use you regardless if it's not necessarily purchasing a property? Can they use your services?
Yes, and we do a lot of just spot transactions too. And by spot transaction, I just mean converting the money right at the time somebody needs it without locking in a guaranteed rate. But to use us to move money, whether you're buying a car or whatever, buying a bunch of furniture, we basically start at a minimum of $100,000. So if you're moving more than $100,000, yes, you can use us either for those spot trades or for locking in a guaranteed rate. But we start at a higher number because that's when it gets difficult to move money to Mexico, right? Like if you're moving $5,000 or $10,000, there's a lot of options out there. But it's when you're moving those larger amounts of money that it becomes not only, a hassle, but also it's when the fees that are charged can really add up on those larger amounts of money. And that's when we really can come in and save somebody a bunch of money through reduced rates and through locking in a guaranteed rate.
Do you work with the banks? I know especially lately the banks, especially in Canada, are there is very difficult for any Canadians to move large amounts of money into Mexico at the time at the moment. How can your company help them to maybe go ahead?
So depending on whether we're working with individuals or whether we're working with Mexican corporations, like a lot of times we work with the developers too, right? But when we're working with individuals, we have a banking partner that's based in the United Kingdom, in London. And it makes it easier because you're then moving money from, let's say, Canada into a bank account that we help you set up that is based in London. And then you're sending the money from London into Mexico, which is much easier now, especially, than sending money just from Canada to the United States. Because as we know, all of these new sanctions that came out from the United States against Intercam and Vector and Cbanco, they've made it very difficult to move large amounts of money right
Right.
now. But
You can't
with us,
actually.
we're
You
not
can't.
sending it.
I'm sorry.
Exactly, you can't. So No, you're exactly right. You can't now. So, we're in an easy way that can move the money by using our banking partner in the United Kingdom to move those. First you move the dollars or Canadian dollars into our banking platform based in the UK. Then you convert those dollars into pesos, and then those pesos get sent to your Mexican account, which
Doesn't
is
that
much
cost?
easier.
But sorry, no, go ahead.
Sorry?
No, 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 go ahead. Sorry to
Well, and
interrupt.
that's much easier now because of all the US sanctions, right? So before, everybody was just sending money from the US and they would send it to Intercam or to Cbanco, and you can no longer do that. So, if you have another Mexican bank account, like a BBVA account or a Santander account, you can still move money there. But a lot of foreigners don't have those BBVA or Santander or other Mexican bank accounts, and therefore they have no other options. So needless to say, since those sanctions have come into play, we've been super busy because we are able to move that money.
Right. Moving the money to a London or to England bank, doesn't that add more cost to the transactions?
It not only does it not add more costs, it actually reduces the cost
Oh,
because
wow.
on our banking platform, the exchange rate that you're getting is much better than a rate that you would get from a typical bank. So let me explain that. Let's say the peso is at 20 to the US dollar right now. If you're moving that from the US to whatever, BBVA or Intercam, they're charging you on that exchange. They're they're charging you on that exchange probably 2+% on the conversion. But with our platform, it is much, much cheaper than 2%. So it actually ends up saving you a lot of money by using our banking partners because of the reduced exchange rate or the reduced fee on that exchange rate that you end up paying. And it doesn't really add any time to it either because, this is all done on these online platforms through, ACH or SPAY transfers, which we use in Mexico. So, the money will be, when it gets wired from our accounts, it will hit the account in Mexico in less than a day, which is usually faster than most of those bigger banks. So not only is it cheaper, but it also tends to be a lot faster than using a typical bank.
Very good. I usually try to get my clients, prospect investors or buyers, to purchase the properties in pesos. What do you think about doing the whole transaction in pesos rather than in dollars?
Me and you have talked about this before, and I think that's really smart. Because think about it, if you're buying a piece of property from a Mexican seller or a Mexican developer, ultimately that person wants pesos, right? They're Mexican, they live in Mexico, they want pesos. So if you negotiate something in dollars when their end goal is to have pesos, a lot of times that developer or seller will sort of bake in a contingency for currencies into the amount of dollars that they're willing to accept because they want to make sure that they're going to receive a certain amount of pesos. So if you skip that conversion and you skip these currency fluctuations and you just negotiate the sales price in pesos, they're not potentially adding a little buffer in there like they would if they signed a contract in dollars. So you may actually get a reduced price if you negotiate in pesos versus dollars. And, we're in Mexico. The national currency, obviously, of Mexico is the peso.
Right.
If you're buying something from a Mexican seller or developer, you should negotiate in pesos, and usually it will go in your favor.
But regardless, if somebody, we have a lot of owners now that they would like to sell their property and they're either Canadians or they're Americans and they do want to sell in dollars. Um, you still can be in a play and help them out with the currency risks and the fluctuations and everything, correct?
Well, it's interesting. When we started the company, our primary focus was on, hedging currency risk between US dollars or Canadian dollars and the peso, right? But, even if something is being sold here in Mexico, like they're heavily dollarized markets. A lot of times things in Puerto Vallarta are sold in dollars because there's tons of foreigners that live here, or Cabo or San Miguel de Allende. A lot of that stuff is sold in dollars. But even if it's sold in dollars, it's never sold in Canadian dollars, right? So a lot of our recent clients have been Canadians who are buying things in Mexico, but they're buying them in US dollars.
Right.
And they have been using us to hedge against that risk of the dollar to Canadian dollar fluctuation. Historically, that's been a very stable currency pairing, but recently there's just so much sort of volatility, even between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar, that we've been working with a lot of clients to protect them against that risk, having nothing to do with pesos, just between Canadian dollars and US dollars.
Right. Right. So, what would be, so I have it's an example, right? I have a client and he wants to buy a property here. I of course will put you directly in contact with you and you will explain everything to them and how it works and where can they get a hold of you? How can they talk to you even prior to, if they're only just looking or curious about this whole currency risks, can they contact you? And
Of course, a lot of our business comes through realtors like yourself who know about us. And, you'll say, hey, George, I have a client, Bob and Mary from Ohio or Ontario, and they're buying a place, and, you'll put me in touch with them. But a lot of, people contact us directly all the time. It certainly doesn't have to come through a realtor. They can go through our website, which is www.mexedge.com. On all of our social medias, they're all just MexEdge, and you can contact us through WhatsApp or TikTok or any of the social medias, and they can schedule an appointment with us, and we sort of give them a very thorough presentation of exactly how all of this stuff works so that they
Right.
understand it. So yeah, they can reach out to us through our website, through social media, and just schedule that introductory call where we go through this stuff in detail, because it's a lot of information, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
we like our clients to really understand, not only how our product works, but also we like them to understand the risks associated with currency exchange, because a lot of them aren't aware of it. And until we explain that to them and show them examples of how much it can affect them, sometimes they're sort of oblivious. They don't know the risks associated with it.
Right, right. This is something I'm myself learning about it. I'm really excited about. Every time I talk to you, I learn a little bit more about it. So I think it's a wonderful option. And I like to give that option to my clients. So it is wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to add to this, George?
No, just for realtors like you, Carla, and we've talked about this before, we're sort of like just another tool that the realtor has to be able to get a deal closed, right? And, I talked to a realtor the other day who, after I explained everything that we did, he was like, oh man, I had a client back in January, and the client was unwilling to move forward with the deal because they were so worried about currency fluctuations. Well, after I talked to him and I explained how all this worked, he called that client up, he explained everything, I met with the client, and the deal is now back on the table. And I think they're closing in, I don't know, a month or something.
Right.
So
That's
it's just a
wonderful.
great deal, yeah, it's a great deal, or a great tool for the realtors to have. It's a great tool for, your clients to have, or just individuals who are buying or building anything in Mexico.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for your time, for explaining everything to us. And that's all I have for now.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure, Carla. I appreciate it, and standing by.
If you have any questions, click the link below and you can talk directly with George. He will answer any questions you may have.